And a great pleasure right now to welcome to our show today here on Sports Talk, a man who's written a very interesting book, just dropping, as they say in the business today as we tape this interview. His name is Scott Raab. He has written a book, maybe more of a of a letter to a famous basketball player. It's called The Whore of Akron, a very provocative title. One Man's Search for the Soul of LeBron James. Clevelander Scott Raab joined us by telephone today. Scott, how are you?
Great to be here, Doug. I'm happy. Today's the day. November 15th, the book is out. It exists.
I guess for an author, the time that happens, I mean, it's out of your hands at this point. You just have to let it go, right?
Yeah, but you know what? It's a pleasure. At least this way, LeBron, even it's just the sound of a mosquito buzzing in his ear, he knows he didn't get away from Cleveland scot-free.
I had a chance to read through the book, and it's more than just your displeasure and Clevelander's displeasure at LeBron. You talk about a lot of things in the book about your life, which I think is very interesting too. I think the people are going to get a kick out of it. But obviously the underlying theme is Cleveland sports has not had a winner since the '64 Browns, and you thought LeBron would be the guy that might bring it to town with basketball, and that's not going to happen.
Well, it may sound naive at this point. Certainly it sounds foolish, but we bought into the whole narrative of the hometown hero, the Moses, leading the tribe to the promised land. And for 7 years, we felt like the center of the NBA universe. And you went into every season feeling like you had a legitimate shot at winning it all. It's not all on him that didn't happen. He wasn't the coach. He wasn't the GM. But he walked away after saying, I'm not going to go chasing titles. My goal is to bring a title home. And he did it in the worst possible way.
How big was he, before we get to him leaving and all that, how big was he, at least known locally, as that high school player? We saw him when ESPN started to cover a couple of his games. Was he known even before that?
Well, before that, locally, especially in Akron, he had to make a decision. Before Sports Illustrated anointed him as the chosen one as a high school, he had to make a big decision about whether he was going to go to the big Akron-Buckdale High School, which is, I don't want to say, the black high school, but that's the reality. Where he grew up in West Akron, you went to Akron-Buckdale, and that's where he was supposed to play ball. He made a decision to go to a school, a smaller school, almost an all-white school, St. Vincent St. Mary, and in a way it was a preview because the community of West Akron at that time really did feel betrayed, and they felt as if he owed it to them to go to Buckdale, and so he was at least both famous and a little bit notorious before he even really came out to the national radar screen.
Yeah, I know when ESPN showed a couple of his games, I mean, they treated it like he was already in the NBA. Of course, he did get drafted right out of high school, but it seemed like even ESPN anointed him at that point.
His mom and he explored the possibility of not even finishing high school and going into the NBA. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a high schooler, and they dropped the chosen one bomb on him when he was 15 years old, 16 years old, and NBA players started coming around, and he went to Chicago working out with Michael Jordan. So he was a basketball Zeus at a very early age, came into the league with an extraordinary amount of hype, and one of the amazing things about him is he outplayed the hype year in and year out.
Yeah, I remember a few other players that have done that. Moses Malone comes to mind, who I believe pretty much dominated right out of the bat. Darryl Dawkins was another one. I don't think he quite lived up to that hype, but very few have done it. And LeBron James did come right out and average, I guess, nearly 20 a game his first year, if I'm not mistaken. At least he was up there. But
the range of his talent, as an intuitive ball sharer, as a pinpoint passer. I mean, he's yet to develop that whole low post game, but he hauls down an impressive number of rebounds, and that overall game is awfully impressive.
As a Cleveland sports fan, Scott, when Cleveland got him, the Cavaliers did. Did you feel happy about that, or did you think, well, this guy is a little arrogant, and we got to watch out? Did you have that feeling at that point?
I think I was as happy as anyone else in Cleveland, in a town where two generations of fans have known nothing but sports misery. Finally, the balls bounced our way, and I mean, they shamefully tanked the year before to get to 17 wins. But we got LeBron, and it meant the world, and it was a sports history.
Previous to that, with the Cavaliers, you had some decent teams early on with guys like Bingo Smith. I know you know him well. He was the big star for the Cavs for a while, wasn't he?
You know, people should YouTube the miracle of Richfield. You know, the Cavs in their 6th year of existence made a mid-season trade for Nate Thurmond.
Right.
He joined that team. Bill Fitch was becoming a great NBA coach, and that team really was the first taste Cleveland got. I mean, when they beat the Bullets in the first round of the playoffs, there were fewer rounds then, the fans poured onto the court, tore down the baskets. We were looking at Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals with a team full of youth and yet had the wisdom of age that Nate Thurmond brought with him. And then in a practice before the Celtics series, the starting center, Jim Jones, stepped on a teammate's foot and broke his foot.
Oh.
And that was that. In other words, the miracle of Richfield, which is how it's known here, turned out to be yet another bitter ending for Cleveland sports fans. That was the miracle.
I know. I remember watching those teams a few times. I grew up in New York watching the great Knick teams, although toward the late 70s they kind of fell apart. But I did see Cleveland several times at the Garden, and they had those great uniforms, too, the kind of burgundy wine-colored with the yellow stripes along the side.
Yep. And they put together a great team again just when Michael Jordan was coming of age.
Right.
You know, you had Brad Daugherty, you had Mark Price, you had Ron Harper, you had Larry Nance, you had and Lenny Wilkens was a great coach. So you had a team playing beautiful basketball, and then they ran into the best player in basketball history just when he was ready to emerge as the best player in basketball. And of course, everyone remembers the shot, especially Clevelanders.
Yes. I guess Clevelanders and Chicago fans, or Cub fans, maybe to be more specific, have the most painful memories of sports to deal with.
I think the Cubs fans, I mean, 1908, man, that's a long time ago. And I think fans in every town have every right, you know, to express their passion and when it's turned sour to wine. But one of the things I always want to emphasize about Cleveland is for a town with franchises in Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, to have gone since 1964 without one of those teams winning a championship is a miserable record, and it's just going on and on and on. I mean, you could look at LeBron's departure as just one more unhappy ending, but the truth of the matter is there was a lot of spirit of that. I mean, this town really needs a winner.
Well, you came close in the World Series. Lost in the Game 7. I don't want to remind you of that, but
yes,
not too long ago.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Miles. with a one-run lead going into the 9th inning.
I know.
Game 7, when Jose, and I won't even pronounce his middle name as it's pronounced in Cleveland because we can't really say that on the air, when Jose Mesa managed to blow a one-run lead in Game 7 against the Florida Marlins, and just, again, a bitter defeat.
Well, as a Yankee fan, the Marlins beat my team too, so I know a little bit of what you went through, but not the anguish.
So wait a second. As a Yankee fan, you're going to stake some claim to misery?
Well, I didn't say I was miserable, but it was tough to see them lose to the Marlins.
I know. That's the funny thing is that so there's a franchise that has built 2 World Series champions in a relatively brief period of time, sold all the talent down the river.
Twice.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And yet in Cleveland and market small, market medium, economic imbalance in certain sports, especially baseball. All that aside, each of those franchises has built very good teams in Cleveland, and none of those teams has ever managed to quite, bring back a championship.
Let's talk about, we mentioned it briefly, the departure, the famous interview now that was on, I guess ESPN set aside a block of time for that. How was that for you to watch?
It was difficult. Even that day, people were calling me, and not just average fans, but people who worked with the Cavaliers were calling and saying, "Don't worry, he's staying. He wouldn't spend an hour of prime time TV on ESPN if he was going to leave. He would never do that to Northeastern Ohio. He's not that dumb. He's not that callous." Yeah. It worked out just great. A whole hour. I mean, it was a disgrace. It really was. You want to announce your free agency like every other player in the history of free agency, go right ahead. But if you're going to take that hour, you get on TV and tell the fans, hey, I could go anywhere. I'm wanted anywhere, but I'm staying home and I'm going to bring these fans. No, he doesn't do that. He's taking his talents to South Beach, and then we have to be subjected to the burned jury. You know, it was just an awful, awful night.
Yeah, Jim Gray, I believe, had a hand in producing that hour too, so he was kind of part of that whole thing. I think he's kind of paid the price for it. I think LeBron still hasn't recovered as far as many people in the public eye from a PR standpoint. And my impression, I've never met him, I've never interviewed him, but just watching him in interviews that he does very few of them, still seems to be a bit arrogant to me. I mean, is that the impression you get?
A bit. You are so kind. I mean, he loses, he chokes. Look, you don't have to be a Clevelander or a Cleveland fan to acknowledge he single-handedly choked 4 games away of the finals.
Oh, no doubt about that. But I'm talking personally, the way he acts.
But that's what I'm saying. Then at the press conference afterwards, he doesn't say, I let my team down. He doesn't say any of that. His first question about all the people who were rooting for you to fail, and he comes out with that stuff about how we're all going to have to go back to our miserable little lives.
Right.
And that, if that's not, it's not just arrogance, although it certainly is that. It's the amount of contempt he has for everyone but LeBron James that puts him in a category of like megalomaniac.
Well, you talk about his mother in the book. Of course, the story about her having, I guess, some extracurricular activities with other athletes. I guess. I mean, how much does she play in this, and what's her story?
Doug, I kind of discounted that whole thing. I mean, I think Gloria James is a tough cookie, and came up hard, and has had a history of not being able to necessarily hold her substances. And at the same time, I don't buy that. I mean, she loves that kid fiercely, and whether that's money-based or not, she is his mother, and he loves her. And I don't believe for a second that she actually, got sexual with a teammate of his. But as we saw last season, she slaps a parking lot attendant in Miami Beach at 4 a.m.
Right.
And then goes to the police station and says, do you know who I am? So if we're wondering about where LeBron inherited that arrogance and sense of entitlement and of being more important than anyone else walking the face of the earth, I think Gloria James is a really good place to start.
I know you're probably tired of it too. If I see that stupid thing with the chalk one more time, I'm going to throw up. And I'm not even a fan of his.
It's funny. If they had set out deliberately to destroy his reputation in places they have no love for Cleveland or the Cavaliers in a lot of NBA cities, but they liked the narrative until the decision was that LeBron was a good guy and he was a hometown hero, and isn't that great? And they managed to destroy that while they thought they were doing the right thing. It's just stunning to me, and it hasn't let up. It just hasn't. He's had a good summer. He hasn't said anything terribly stupid. But here's a guy also who people go, oh, he created a new paradigm for the young athlete to seize control of his destiny and all that. And where are LeBron and his manager Maverick Carter to be found during this whole ugly, drawn-out lockout negotiations? Nowhere. Once again, when the pressure comes down, LeBron James is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, he has not made any statements, as far as I've seen, at all about this. Which
he hasn't gone to New York to stand tall with his brethren. None of that stuff.
Well, the book is not just about LeBron. It also talks about some of your life, and you've gone through some difficult times, but you seem to have come out of it okay. I mean, you doing okay, Scott?
After Lou Gehrig, I am the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I'm not even joking. There are lots of people who went through a lot tougher time than I did coming up. But one of the things I wanted to examine in the book, not for the sake of exposing my flaws, but what made me the kind of fan who would wish for an injury. I mean, I know I can be angry or be a hater or whatever, but people said that. How could you? Now, my definition of a sports fan is if you've never, in your mind, hoped for an injury. I've heard fans cheer when a hometown player got hurt because they were tired of him. But I really wanted to figure out what it is that made me so fanatical, and just to find out, because the Cleveland story isn't just the sports teams. When I was born, this was the 7th largest city in the country, and it thought well of itself. And people had blue-collar, middle-class jobs. We know they don't exist anymore. but to see the city spiral downhill and become a national joke at certain points, and to see the teams kind of reinforce that, that's part of the story, and I wanted to tell it that way.
Yeah, it is really a history of not only just the sports of Cleveland, but the city of Cleveland a bit. You get a taste of that in the book. It's called The Whore of Akron, One Man's Search for the Soul of LeBron James. We've been talking with Scott Raab today. You're also a freelance writer for Esquire, so you get to cover a lot of interesting stories, right?
I'm not, thank goodness, one of the lucky breaks is not having to be a freelancer. I've been writing for Esquire full time for 15 years.
Oh, okay. I misread that. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No, not at all, Doug. It's really the greatest job. We all know Prince's been dying for about half a century now, but I've had a great 20-year run Esquire, and a few years before that at GQ, and it's part of what I think informs the book is that I tried to report it like a journalist, but I tried to write it like a passionate fan, and I think it's a funny book. It's certainly not some kind of 300-page tweet of hatred at LeBron James. It's a lot deeper and more complex than that.
No, it really is. You really kind of get involved with your life and what you went through, so I really found it fascinating. And Scott, I know it just drops today as we tape this, but I guess available on all the book sites. Do you have a particular site, or people can get a hold of you?
I operate out of whoreofakron.com.
Okay, that's easy to remember.
And you can order the book off that site. We're uploading YouTube videos, mostly documentaries. I dropped off a book at LeBron's mansion in northeastern Ohio. He wasn't there. I handed it to the security guard. I inscribed it to LeBron with gratitude for making this book possible.
Well, I hope he reads it.
Me too.
Scott, pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for taking some time today. I know it's a busy one for you, but we look forward to talking to you again down the road, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks a million. Been great.